We were expecting, based on your initial schedule, that today roundups of criminal illegal aliens and the process of deporting them would begin. That seems to have been put on hold for a little while. When can we expect that to happen? Where will it begin?
No, it started.
It has started.
ICE teams are out there as of today. We gave them the direction to prioritize public safety threats that we're looking for. Teams are out there effective today.
Hi again, everyone. It's 5 o'clock in New York. The crackdown is underway. It has begun mere hours after Donald Trump was sworn into office. He signed an array of executive orders pushing forward his anti-immigration agenda, from declaring a national emergency at the southern border to halting refugee admissions into the country and much, much more, all amounting to what the New York Times describes this way. Quote, the leading edge of an effort to roll back 4 years of policies put in place by the Biden administration and reimpose an agenda that would fundamentally upend the United States' global role as a sanctuary for refugees and immigrants. But the crackdown came from the other side as well. Donald Trump's orders were immediately faced with legal challenges. The ACLU out last night with a lawsuit against Trump's order seeking to end birthright citizenship, a right guaranteed in the Constitution under the 14th Amendment. Anthony Romero, the ACLU's executive director, saying this, quote, denying citizenship to U.S.-born children is not only unconstitutional, it's also a reckless and ruthless repudiation of American values. Birthright citizenship is part of what makes the U.S. the strong and dynamic nation that it is. This order seeks to repeat one of the gravest errors in American history by creating a permanent subclass of people born in the U.S. who are denied full rights as Americans. We will not let this attack on newborns and future generations of Americans go unchallenged. The Trump administration's overreach is so egregious that we are confident we will ultimately prevail. That lawsuit was followed up today by another from the New York Attorney General and a coalition of 17 other states in the cities of D.C. and San Francisco, who said this, quote, our Constitution is not open to reinterpretation by executive order or presidential decree. President Trump's attempt to undermine the fundamental right to birthright citizenship is not just unconstitutional, it is profoundly dangerous. 4 more states filed their own suit this afternoon. Trump's additional orders giving the U.S. military a more specific role at the southern border and the one paving the way for him to use the Alien Enemies Act are also likely to face challenges in the courts. In the flurry of all these actions, Trump also took aim at his predecessor and rescinded the order President Biden signed just weeks into his own administration, which created a task force to reunite all the immigrant families who have been separated under Trump's family separation policy, including children. As our friend and colleague Jacob Soboroff reminds us, as many as 1,000 families and young children remain separated because of that policy. Donald Trump's massive anti-immigration push starting on day one is where we begin this hour with some of our favorite experts and reporters and friends. NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff is back. Also joining us, National League Director for the ACLU, Cecilia Wong is here, plus immigration policy expert and Vice President for Immigration Policy and Campaigns at Forward U.S., Andrea Flores is here. Jacob Soboroff, I want to start on family separation because it's where you and I have had the most conversations and where I know your reporting is in a league of its own. Tell me what Trump's actions mean for families and kids who are still separated.
1,000 children, Nicole, as many as 1,000 children today, 6 and 7 years after the implementation of the zero tolerance policy, which deliberately took 5,500 children from their parents for no other reason than to harm them. The cruelty was the point, and the reporting bears that out. It was called government-sanctioned child abuse by the American Academy of Pediatrics. It was called torture by Physicians for Human Rights. It was called one of the most shameful chapters in the history of our country by the Republican-appointed judge that stopped the policy and ordered the reunifications. Those 1,000 children who may still, today as I speak to you, be separated from their parents. The federal government effort that was created under the previous administration, the Biden administration, to track down and reunite those children, which is ongoing, up until yesterday, has been dismantled by President Trump and the Trump administration. They know exactly what it means to dismantle the family reunification task force. They know exactly what it means for those children and those parents who have gone through this policy that they themselves implemented in 2017 secretly, and then 2018, obviously very publicly. And they wanted to send a message clearly by rescinding the executive order creating that task force on day one of this second Trump administration.
Jacob, I want to press you on the why. I mean, there is a lot of support for, if you ask in a poll, are you supportive of deporting people here illegally who commit violent crimes? I think 87% of respondents in a New York Times poll say yes. It's almost the inverse when you ask people if they are supportive of separating very young children from their parents indefinitely. I don't think you get much more than 13% of people saying, yeah, that's a great idea. Why? Why did Trump do this when there's so much support for so many of his other swings?
Because I think that, I don't know what they believe, but what I can tell you is they went out there at the Republican National Convention. I stood there, I reported with you about those signs, mass deportations now. And mass deportations, as we've talked about, are family separation by another name. It's not taking children from their parents at the border. It's separating parents away from their children in the interior, at their school, now as official government policy, potentially in their schools, in their churches, in these sensitive locations that were protected up until the beginning of this administration, but are no longer protected pursuant to orders that have been effectuated by the current Trump administration. And I don't know what they believe, but clearly if they think that mass deportation has the support, they must also believe, or at least take into consideration, that this family separation executive order will also have similar support. But what I can tell you is, having seen it myself on the ground, when people saw family separation, they stood up around the world and they stopped that policy from happening. And when and if mass deportations on a scale larger than Dwight D. Eisenhower in 1954 take place in this country, when the American people see those family separations, the reaction is not going to be to sit on their hands. When there are images of mothers and sons and daughters and fathers being ripped apart from one another in the interior, I can't imagine, as I heard you talking about with John Heilemann yesterday, that those poll numbers don't shift on deportations closer to where they are on family separations.
Andrea, the moment to see what happens may be closer than anyone realizes. I think people who thought they could check out for a while may be in for a harsh surprise. Our colleague Julia Ainsley is reporting that Mr. Holman, who's the gentleman being interviewed in the clip we came in on, has indicated that targeted enforcement operations, that's a quote, are underway, that this work has started. What are you bracing for, and what should the country brace for?
Sure. So right now, when I listen to that Holman interview, I hear a lot of warning and fear mongering to the public. So what I first want to say is that there is no significant change right now to how ICE is conducting its enforcement, but there will be in the coming hours and days. And so it's very important for every single community member who wants to support impacted immigrants that they provide Know Your Rights materials, that mayors and governors really fund and support their legal service providers, and that everyone prepares to be able to determine what's fact and fiction about what's coming. What we saw in yesterday's immigration orders, there were some immediate changes to immigration policy, but there were a lot of very troubling previews that will cause great disruptions in our immigration system, not just for immigrants, but for U.S. citizens. President Trump has declared that there has been an invasion, is unclearly defined, but he's citing the Constitution and saying that anyone who came in under President Biden participated in that invasion. And he uses that across all of the executive orders to justify looking and investigating every single type of immigrant who is in the U.S. It's extremely broad. So what I'm looking for is if President Trump, to your point, responds to what the public wants. And if he starts to exempt whether people who've been here for a long time, immigrants who are dreamers, immigrants who are fleeing conflicts that the United States, supports their refuge here in the United States, is he going to actually abandon Afghan allies who are already vetted and approved? There are many issues in the immigration space that the public actually supports. But what we're seeing is huge backlash to President Biden's administration, which, to be fair, was very damaging on immigration politics, because too often President Biden told the American people that what they were witnessing was not a crisis and was not a problem. But if President Trump overcorrects, as we have already seen with some of these executive orders, he will turn the public away further. And I think policymakers have an opportunity, especially in Congress, to be honest brokers and really cut through some of these executive orders and bring the conversation back to Congress.
And